Cosmic salutations, divine humanity. Darren Austin Hall here to discuss the Mars retrograde that we are collectively experiencing at the moment and how it relates to particularly the warrior and the spiritual warrior within us. So I myself wasn't even aware that this transit was really occurring. It was thanks to my dear friend Heidi who awoke me to this, and we've been pretty much in a Mars retrograde since the beginning of December. And it initially moved through Leo, and now it's in Cancer here in mid-January, approaching mid-January in 2025. And why I think this is highly relevant, because first of all, it never ceases to amaze me when you study and investigate astrology, how it tends to really mirror the themes of your life. Now, this could be self-fulfilling prophecy, some could say that, but I just see this remarkable precision whenever I get an update about something astrologically that is happening, and I look into my life and I'm like, wow, yes, my life was pretty much being guided by these starry alignments. And I see that right now with this Mars retrograde, in the sense that I myself have been finding it very hard to conduct purposeful action in my life. It seems like my action steps have all of a sudden become very muddied and even obscured, not very clear about the direction that I'm supposed to be going to. And of course, for those of you who really follow the Gregorian calendar and really feel this zest of at the beginning of the new year, it's time to set the new patterns and the new resolutions, this can be quite a disconcerting transit. Because Mars retrograde is literally saying this is not the time at all for big actions whatsoever. It is not a time to make huge, massive changes in your life. And on an aside, I've counseled this a lot, especially because I used to live up in Canada in the northern latitudes. And if you are experiencing winter as we go through the new year, according to the Gregorian calendar, winter is not a time to really set big changes up in your life. It is really a time to rest, to rejuvenate, and to actually go on a very inner hermiting visionary journey, to review, the 3 seasons prior and all of their transformations, and to consider the dream seeds, as I call them, that you will then plant in the spring. Now, this is important because the spring has literally it puts a spring in your step. It's that zest of the snows melt, the winter is gone, the long slumber, the dead of winter now opens a pathway to profound and effulgent growth. And you can see this, especially if you live in the north, when spring starts to hit in those first few warm days, maybe start to happen in April, you just feel this incredible lightness of being, this joyfulness that comes upon you. And of course, with more warmth and more sunlight, you do feel more enthused to make big changes in your life. So something to reflect on. And this Mars retrograde is going to go, I believe it's all the way till the end of February. And this is, I think, one of the reasons, or near to the end of February, but one of the reasons Barbara Hanclau is one of my favorite visionaries and writers and astrologers, said in her winter solstice reading at the end of last year that 2025 is really going to take its time to get going. It's really not actually going to get into full motion until March. And this is because of the Mars retrograde, of course, and other transits that are happening. So just to throw some caution in the wind, if you are filled with all this gusto to make big changes and you're finding yourself kind of hijacked, that it's not being able to go forward. So if that is the case, take heart, because it's the cosmos as well that is playing its beautiful mythological games with us. And when I say mythological or mythopoetic, this is the beauty of astrology, is it starts to highlight these grand collective themes that churn in all of our lives. And the Mars retrograde is particularly interesting because Mars represents, of course, the warrior within us. It also represents the hero in us, that brash, bold part of us that always feels it can overcome obstacles. And it also rules, just primal passion. It's very fiery. And when it goes into retrograde, it's inviting our warrior, or rather compelling our warrior, to go on a dark night of the soul, to really take a step back and to review. So during this retrograde, you're already finding your steps feeling, and maybe you're feeling quite exhausted even energetically. This is the Mars retrograde saying, please relax and rest. And it's also a time where we can start to go and do some inner work around the warrior archetype within us. We can start to look at, how is my warrior doing in my life? How is its conduct? So just to highlight some of the themes of the warrior archetype, which is this inner force within all of our psyches as human beings. The warrior, as I've mentioned, really is about taking action steps, but it's also about strategy. So it's also about being strategic with those action steps, not just acting in a reactionary way, emotionally reactive way. And this full moon in Cancer that we've just passed through, and now that Mars retrograde is really in the sign of Cancer, this is going to be a big highlight, is that the warrior needs to really understand how to be emotionally intelligent. And because the warrior tends to connect more with our masculine side, Cancer as the nurturer is really highlighting the feminine. And so there is this beautiful marriage that can be, but of course Mars really struggles in Cancer. So it's kind of these opposites that have attracted each other. And the challenge, the beautiful sweetness of this adversity, is if we can do this inner work, as the warrior goes within and starts to be kind of chided for its bold and brash maneuvers in our life, if we can start to review and take stock, where have I acted in a reactionary way? Where have I been acting without proper strategy? Because we want to take in effect that strategy is very important to the warrior in its fullness, when it is in the pure radiance of its healthy being. It takes time. It's like the samurai is a perfect example of the noble warrior. The samurai have this stoicism about them, this moderation in their action. The samurai would often say, one of their proverbs, and I'm paraphrasing, is that it was always a bad day to unsheath one's sword and have to fight sword to sword with someone, because they were trained to be such great sages and diplomats, that it was through nonviolent communication and such, and their just virtuous conduct, that they were able to appease and mollify people who were like really reactionary. So they were very emotionally intelligent. And this is going to be a huge theme as Mars, through this retrograde, is being initiated by Cancer. It's really about how can we look at our emotions as actually the primal intelligence, the vibrational intelligence, intuitive intelligence aspect of our being. And in order to work with your emotions, you have to sit with them. So this is also a time to review, where are there emotions in your life, deep-seated feelings that have been just triggering you to no end. And there's this sinking suspicion, I know where this is coming from. I know I have to sit with this at some point. Well, this is the time to really sit with it. And as I teach in a lot of my workshops and trainings, one of the most beautiful things that we need to bring back into our spiritual lives is the art of contemplation. And I see contemplation as meditative thinking. So it is literally sitting and spending about 5 to 10 minutes setting the table of your awareness, coming into breath awareness, coming into that relaxed state of being where you are anchored in your embodiment. Remember, for me, meditation is about living in the body in an embodied way. It's not about flying away into some transcendental experience. It's about feeling the body. This is very much inspired by Eckhart Tolle's inner body awareness exercises, feeling the energy field of the body, which is the living energy that is us essentially, and that anchors us. And then from that moment, when we feel properly locked in, properly calm and peaceful, and we're able to, witness our thoughts, have that space between them where we're not totally identified with them, where we can sit on that higher perch and watch that river of tumultuous thoughts just flowing by, thoughts and feelings, then that is when we bring forth this emotional piece that's been bothering us. And because why this is important is because when you are in that witness consciousness, it is not just simply an observer awareness. It is an awareness that is expansive and plugs into a kind of cosmic consciousness. And so that's why when people meditate, they often find insights and revelations can come out of nowhere. It's because the egoic mind, with all its limitations, is brought into an expansion where we expand to this transpersonal sense of self. And transpersonal is going to be a huge issue for the warrior as well that I'll get into later. So then we can bring that emotional issue forward. And the idea is you just allow it to be felt. It's not a direct probing of the analytical mind. It's about just observing it. And what tends to happen is the emotion will start to send messengers because it's energy in motion, and it has a very primal, intuitive intelligence to it. So it's going to probably start to give you revelations about why you feel this way. And those will be very big teaching moments for you to then integrate. And you can contemplate time and time and again. There could be multi-layers to this issue. But ultimately, I'm counseling that we need to take time to sit with these emotions during this Mars retrograde. It's a great opportunity to really do this work. And if you want to go even deeper into truly becoming an emotionally intelligent being, rather than someone that's constantly like, oh, I feel something and I immediately express and in these reactionary ways, where we can actually take breath and really like feel the emotion and really get what it needs to tell us. And sometimes that means to have time alone where those feelings are allowed to be really big, like having a good cry with your grief, raging into a pillow. These things will allow the emotion to be expanded so the full breadth of its information can be received. And one of the great methods to really do this in a very deep level, which could be a great Mars retrograde practice, is the presence process by Michael Brown, which was recommended to be my Gabor Mate. And this is a 10-week process where Michael's incredible astute teachings take you through this graduated journey of becoming more and more aware of the vibrational triggers that represent your emotionality and how to integrate them. I have said this before, I believe every human being on the planet needs to do the presence process at least once. It's recommended to actually do 3 times because emotional reactivity is at the root of so many problems on the planet. We are literally allowing our emotions to possess us, take us into our unconsciousness, and then we act in often even violent ways, very divisive ways. So learning the art of contemplation, meditative thinking, the presence process are really great tools during this time as our inner warrior is being initiated by the nurturing Cancer, which is all about emotions. Now, another way that you can do this work is Cancer is also about empathy. It's also about relationships. Relationships are very meaningful to that Cancerian part of us. And this highlight is really trying to tell our warrior as well that it's no longer the time to be the lone wolf, to be the mercenary. We need to work in teams. But it's also important to recognize that if we have grievances with people, if we have issues with people, now is the time to sit with that. We don't necessarily have to go directly to the person, but we need to sit with this. And a great practice that you can do is meditating on the merits of others. You know, it could just take 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Start to bring to mind people in your life. And I would start with people that you really love, that you really adore. And just consider the merits. What virtues do they have that you really admire about these people? And once you've got, maybe 5 of those people done in this kind of meritorious prayer, then start to think of the people that you have grievances against and start to think, well, what good qualities does this person have? And this helps to develop that compassion, that loving kindness, because at the end of the day, whatever the conflict is, whatever's happened to us from another person, everyone is dealing with some kind of suffering. This is what Buddha really highlighted to us. We are all suffering in some way. And often when people act out or act in ways that are very violent or harmful, they're dealing with some kind of pain within themselves. And again, you don't have to, especially if you're in an abusive situation, you don't have to go and seek, some kind of direct solace with this person. But starting to just understand the nature of all of our wounds is very, very profound thing to do during this time period as well. And this is going to really help, the warrior in us, because the warrior, Mars, can be very fiery. And that can get us into a lot of trouble if it's not balanced with all the other archetypal energies within us. So our warrior is also, in its noble fullness, is also quite stoic, because the warrior is a disciple of something, or is someone who is very into discipline, which means to be a disciple of. The warrior is always supposed to be pointed to a higher purpose. So this could be an amazing contemplation that you could be doing during the Mars retrograde. What is my higher purpose? And when I say higher purpose, I mean not just your own personal purpose, but consider how your own personal purpose plugs into something transpersonal. What is your greater service to the world? How do you serve the world? How do you serve your community? How do you serve others? This is a great way to ennoble that warrior archetype in us, to get it to pledge a kind of fealty and allegiance to the king, the queen, the sovereign in us, which is the one who supplies us with those great visions. So in this work, you're actually also initiating contact with your king, queen, which receives the visions from our higher self. And then the warrior is given these visions to follow. So we may ask ourselves, how well are we following our greater missions in our life, And this is great to do journaling on all of this, to write it out. And it's also good to, in the stoicism of the warrior, it can be very somber and sobering. We're literally being humbled during the Mars retrograde. And a perfect example from the myth of movies is the original Star Wars, where you have Luke Skywalker in the first two films really embodying the hero. He has that incredible charismatic belief in himself, that will, that radiant, innocent will that's been unsullied by the challenges of the world, that he can really take on the Empire almost himself. And of course, this is very captivating, and it makes us all believe in the potential of Luke. Luke can do it. He's going to be the savior. But in The Empire Strikes Back, if you remember, when he's being trained by Yoda, and he perpetually has this kind of issue with Yoda, because Yoda's, the true noble warrior. He's very settled in his stoicism. He takes his time. He's very in touch with his magician as well. You can tell he's got a very mystical sense of the world. And he's constantly chiding, this brashness in Luke. He's like, that's going to get you into trouble. You rough around the edges, and you just smooth those things out. And of course, at the end of the film, Luke races off to face Darth Vader, even though Yoda's like, you are not ready. And of course, what happens to Luke? He gets his arm chopped off. And then it's interesting because in the Return of the Jedi, if you remember, he appears, Luke, after he goes back and trains hard with Yoda. He gets the message. And then he's wearing black, and that's a symbol of someone who's come in touch with his limitations, with his mortality. It's kind of this very stoic color. And if you see in that film, Luke is very stoic, very changed. He's even-tempered. There's a moderation to his sensibility. And using all of that, he's able to finally, succeed in being a huge proponent of defeating the Empire. So this is really also about looking at where are we in our immature kind of hero, and how can we evolve ourselves into more of this stoic warrior. So, looking at your disciplines in life, looking at how much are you aiming yourself to this higher purpose. Strategy, are you taking proper strategy with your actions? How are you doing with your emotions? Are you victimized by your emotions, or are you able to sit with your emotions to integrate them, to respond? These are all brilliant attributes of the warrior. So during this time, it's a great opportunity to review, to take stock of these attributes. And of course, this is also about, seeking a deeper marriage with the feminine and the masculine within us. Because as I noted at the offset here, or at the outset, the warrior is really about this masculine power in us. And especially now that we're in the sign of Cancer in our Mars retrograde, it is about honoring the fact that the feminine rules this more intuitive, even mystical awareness that comes more from the heart. And this is also important because, a great spirituality to really integrate into this work is to look at Taoism. Because Taoism is very much about following the ways of nature. It's very much about, really realizing that there is a natural intelligence to things. They call it the guiding realm. And they say when you get in touch with the heart and you discern the whisper of truth, it's this soft, you have to be very present. It's a very soft, whispering voice. This tender truth oracle within us is always guiding us in a perfect way, but we need to humble and soften ourselves to receive this. So it's not about this masculine, rational knowing I'm going to penetrate something with my intelligence. It's about actually opening and receiving. So spending a lot of time in meditation and prayer to open ourselves to receive is very, very important. And this is a huge theme in the general transit we're making into this Aquarian age. We want to be living more from the heart center. The heart is that part of us that is in touch with this guiding realm of nature, this greater consciousness that truly takes us into discerning universal truths about our reality. So it's a very, very powerful opportunity to start living and resting more in our heart space. And one of the last things I'll mention here, and going back to the nurturer and Cancer and working with Mars and emotional intelligence, it really is about bringing empathy in our life. So when we do this merit practice and start to consider the suffering and the wounds that others are going through, we're developing a portal into unity consciousness, because empathy really helps us realize we are all going through our labors. We are all going through our challenges. And that's a beautiful thing to bring to mind during this Mars retrograde. So I hope some of that lands for you, some of those insights. Definitely take time to contemplate your emotional triggers during this retrograde. There's so much beautiful revelations when you do that work and honor your emotions, which is bringing more of that divine feminine online within our being. And truly, the divine feminine and the divine masculine forces within us, they truly interpenetrate, work interdependently, and mutually enthuse each other. And no more is this seen than in that King Arthur myth when he receives his sword Excalibur from the Lady of the Lake. It's this bestowing of the feminine, saying, you have the right to bear this sword, this powerful phallic power, because I know you're going to use it for right. You're going to use your might for right. So the feminine and the masculine really give each other a lot of strengthening. And we need to do this work of reuniting these two aspects of us. So I hope some of that lands, and I'm wishing you a beautiful journey. It's intense times. I know there's a lot going on in the world. So definitely take time to get in touch with your inner warrior and take review, and don't jump out taking these massive actions just yet. That time will come, especially in the spring season. Sending you all so much love.